Hey guys, tonight we squeeze into a narrow alley in ancient Thebes, dodging ox carts, bread vendors, and one extremely irritable goose to explore a world you've probably never thought twice about. The social life of ancient Egyptian barbers. Yep, men with blades, wigs with secrets, and customers who had a lot more than just a haircut on their minds. You'll sit cross-legged in the dust while your head is shaved under the merciless sun, and you'll listen in on gossip that could bring down an entire household. All this from someone wielding a razor sharpened on sandstone, who may or may not be slightly cursed. You probably won't survive this if you're a fan of privacy, air conditioning, or chairs with backs. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop a comment with your location and what time it is where you're listening. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're strolling down a market lane near the Nile, where the scent of fish, honeyed beer, and sun-warmed goat hangs thick in the air. You squint until you spot a small reed canopy propped up beside a mud brick wall. Two boys sit beneath it, one gripping a small copper blade, the other with his head tilted obediently, neck exposed. No signs, no prices, just dust, whispers, and an air of ancient trust. This is your first barbershop. Unlike modern salons with mirrors and magazines, this place is wide open. No doors, no back room, just a low stool and a crowd that's never more than 6 feet away, staring. Privacy. That's a luxury for tombs, not Thebes. Here, grooming is a public performance. You'd better pretend not to mind the stares, because everyone around you is judging your scalp hygiene and how your left ear twitches every time the razor gets close. Most Egyptians keep their heads shaved clean, not because they liked the look, though they kind of did, but because lice were an everyday apocalypse. It's not just vanity, it's pest control. Hair equals danger. A smooth head means survival. But it's not all bald heads. You notice one man walking past with a braided wig so glossy it probably reflects moonlight. He's not just stylish, he's rich. Wigs are made of human hair, date fibers, beeswax, and ambition. And they aren't cut or styled by just anyone. Only barbers with elite training or elite connections get to handle that kind of headgear. You crouch nearby, watching a barber swirl water from a clay pot, sharpening his blade on a whetstone that's older than democracy. He leans in and tilts a client's chin upward. And there's a hush. One wrong flick could nick an artery. But this guy moves like he's painting a masterpiece. You wonder how many necks he's shaved. How many secrets he's overheard. Because yes, barbers in Egypt aren't just blade handlers, they're confidants. Mid-shave, the client mutters something about his neighbor's stolen wheat granaries. The barber nods but doesn't flinch. You're witnessing the original news cycle. Hot gossip passed quietly through soap and steel. Historians still argue whether all barbers belong to a single caste or if they floated between social classes. Some sources suggest they were often servants or low-tier workers. Others hint they held surprisingly trusted positions, especially when razors met royal skin. Fringe historians. Yes, even Egypt has those claim barbers sometimes doubled as informants. That stool, it's part haircut, part confessional. And the fact that their workspace is public doesn't stop anyone from spilling secrets. Quite the opposite. There's something about the hum of flies and the scrape of metal on skin that makes a man talk. The sun moves higher. The barber finishes his shave and rinses the blade with beer. Yes, beer. Not just for drinking, it's alcohol kills bacteria. Sort of. The client slips a polished cowrie shell into the barber's palm and walks off. Still patting his face, you step up next. The stool wobbles. The barber eyes your hair like it personally offended him. He wets your scalp and hums a tune that sounds older than the pyramids. His hands are practiced, his blade warm from the sun. As he works, he tells you about his day. A woman asked for her husband's head shaved in secret, not weird at all. Someone paid in garlic, rude. And a cat knocked over his oil jar, typical. You don't speak. You just sit there, feeling the weight of 5,000 years glide across your skull in copper arcs. Then it's done. The barber steps back, wipes your neck with a cloth that smells vaguely of lotus and regret, and gestures toward a broken shard of pottery as a mirror. You smile politely and pretend you're not bleeding slightly. Your head tingles. The air feels sharper, the world clearer. You rise, lighter, hairless, and somehow part of something much older than yourself. You turn to leave the alley, but the barber stops you with a grin and says something about your royal jawline. He's joking, you hope. One cut down. 14,000 years to go. You're back again, because apparently, one shave wasn't enough. Today, though, you're not just here for a trim, you're here to understand the blurred line between grooming and godliness. Because in ancient Egypt, a barber wasn't always just a guy with a blade. Sometimes, he was also a priest, or maybe a priest was also a barber. The job descriptions weren't exactly mutually exclusive. You follow a younger man barefoot, robed, and far too clean to trust through a temple courtyard. He's carrying a barber's kit, a rolled-up leather pouch with a razor, tweezers, and what looks suspiciously like a makeup brush. You assume he's going to give someone a beard trim, but instead, he ducks into the sacred chamber of a temple dedicated to Horus. Inside, the air is thick with incense and unspoken rules. Statues loom, painted eyes wide open, watching. The priest-barber, yes, that's what people call him, approaches one of the temple guards and starts to prepare him for purification. Not a sermon, not a chant, a shave. The blade glides down the guard's forearm, removing not just hair but, supposedly, spiritual impurities. According to temple texts, you can't enter the sacred zone unless you're pure of body, and that includes being freshly shaved. Head, chest, arms, armpits, you name it. It gets de-haired. Historians still argue whether this shaving was symbolic, hygienic, or both. The consensus, a little of column A, a little of column B, and a sprinkle of mystical tradition for flavor. The priest-barber works methodically, dipping the razor in water that's been blessed or maybe just filtered through reeds. He hums softly, possibly a hymn, possibly a distraction, so the guard doesn't flinch. You lean in and notice something strange. The priest isn't just focused, he's reverent, as if each hair is being released from sin. Barbers outside the temple can gossip and banter, but in here, everything's quiet. Even the bees buzzing near the lotus pond seem to hush as the razor works. The idea that barbers and priests share roles isn't entirely outlandish. In fact, in many temple records, the word used for barber overlaps with terms for servant of the gods. They were often responsible for grooming sacred animals, preparing the dead, or shaving the high priest before ritual. Imagine being in charge of the Pharaoh's chin stubble before the New Year festival. That's pressure. In one particularly fringe text, there's a theory that barbers were considered cleaners of cosmic balance. Sounds dramatic, but if you've ever tried shaving your ankles with a dull blade, you know it kind of is. Your guide finishes his task, wipes down the blade with a cloth embroidered in gold thread, and steps back. The guard bows slightly not to the priest, but to the blade. You blink. That's new. You follow the priest-barber to the side chamber, where he hangs his kit on a hook carved into the shape of a falcon. Then he sits, not to rest, but to record the shave in a scroll. Yes, they log this stuff. There's a whole papyrus scroll titled Ritual Groomings of the Upper Temple. You read over his shoulder as he writes, Purification of arms and crown. One blemish on shoulder, healed with lotus salve. You don't know whether to laugh or start your own grooming journal. Outside, regular barbers are still shaving kids in the street and chatting about donkey prices. But in here, it's elevated sacred. Even a profession that bridges earth and divinity with nothing more than a steady hand and a very sharp blade. You step outside again, blinking against the bright sun. A passing merchant is getting a quick shave by a roadside barber who's also arguing with a fish vendor about the correct pronunciation of ox liver. The contrast hits you. One barber purifies a soul for temple entrance. Another argues over tipping rates, but both wield the same tool, the same copper glint of power. Your scalp itches a little, and you start to wonder, was your first shave secular, or were you unknowingly purified? Does that mean you can now enter sacred spaces, or just get a discount on honey cakes? It's unclear. Still, there's something comforting about it all. The blade connects people across class, purpose, and belief. Whether you're a fisherman trying to impress a girl at the Nile's edge, or a priest entering the sanctuary of Osiris. The ritual begins the same way, with a cut, a pause, and a quiet breath. You walk on, following the scent of shaved cedar and temple incense, wondering how many roles one person can play in a day. A barber, a priest, a secret keeper, maybe even all three before breakfast. You're strolling again, this time deeper into the merchant quarter of Memphis, where wigs are currency and envy smells faintly of palm oil and ambition. There's a different energy here, less dust, more sandalwood. Barbers in this part of town don't squat under makeshift tents. They have stalls lined with linen shades, copper bowls filled with scented water, and a fanboy or two lazily keeping flies away. You pause outside one such stall and watch a well-dressed man settle into the barber's carved wooden chair. Yes, a real chair? That alone tells you, this guy matters. The client removes his wig like someone unsheathing a sacred relic. It's a thick black cascade, curled into tight ringlets and glinting in the sun. The barber receives it like an offering, gently folding it over a padded rack. He begins the meticulous process of scalp cleaning rosewater, natron paste, and something that smells suspiciously like myrrh and regret. This isn't just hygiene, it's status maintenance. In ancient Egypt, wigs were more than accessories. They were social armor. They hid baldness, yes, but also broadcast wealth, rank, and sometimes marital status. There were different styles for scribes, soldiers, bakers, and nobility. One particularly elaborate style, the goddess braid cascade, was so ornate it required a team effort to install and remove. Imagine trying to flirt while your head's basically a team project. You shift your gaze and notice a pattern. Poorer citizens are bald and shining. Middle-class men sport simple short wigs, likely date fiber blends. And the elite, they strut around with mountains of real human hair glued together with resin, beeswax, and ambition. Historians still argue whether wigs were everyday wear or saved for festivals and formal occasions. Some tomb paintings suggest people wore them regularly. Others imply they were reserved for the afterlife or high holidays. Fringe theorists claim wigs were once enchanted, woven with spells to protect the wearer from evil spirits, bad luck, and maybe bad dates. You lean a little closer and spot a curious little case on the barber's shelf. Inside are tiny bone combs, miniature wig stands, and a slab of something like animal fat infused with lotus oil. The barber dabs it onto the wig's underside. Wig glue. You silently thank modern clips and elastic bands for existing. The conversation between barber and client drifts into the air, casual at first, then oddly intimate. The client complains about his wife's cousin borrowing his servants. The barber tisks with sympathy but says nothing incriminating. You sense the barber's power not just as a groomer, but as a vault of dangerous knowledge. He knows who visits whom, who dyes their wig to hide gray, who has lice. And yes, lice still happens, even under wigs, especially under wigs. The client jokes that he once caught a louse reading hieroglyphs off his scalp. The barber doesn't laugh. He just applies more oil. There's a mirror shard propped against the wall. The client checks his reflection and nods, satisfied. The wig is replaced, his social standing restored. He drops a polished amulet into the barber's hand, a tip, and strolls away with the confidence of someone who knows his curls are intimidating. You sit down next. The barber looks at you, head to toe. He gestures to your scalp clean, thank the gods, and then raises an eyebrow at your lack of wig. You shrug. He shrugs back. Bold choice. Going bare. As he oils your head, he talks softly about hair and power. Did you know, he says, that some pharaohs wore lion hair wigs during ceremonies? Probably not real lion hair, but still symbolic. Strength, authority, drama. He claims Queen T once wore a wig that reached her waist and had gold beads braided in. Took 3 servants just to carry the ends, he adds, with a smirk that says maybe, but maybe not. Fringe historians love that one. There's even a debate about whether royal wigs were passed down like heirlooms or burned with their owners. Some say you could trace an entire dynasty by following the scent of their perfumed braids. As your scalp starts to tingle pleasantly from the oils, the barber hums a tune, something old, something slow. You close your eyes, listening. In this world, a wig isn't vanity, it's armor, and the man who tends it is part stylist, part social engineer. He controls your appearance, your scent, your social camouflage. the wrong trim, the wrong scent of oil, and you're suddenly the guy who can't get into temple galas or date wine tastings. You tip him with a small bronze ring. He smiles, not because of the money, but because you're learning the rules. You stand, head shining in the Memphis sun, and step into the street again this time, not just as a curious traveler, but as someone freshly oiled, properly groomed, and socially rearmed. You're still bald, but now you're bald with purpose. You're lingering in the shaded edge of a courtyard now, pretending to admire a fig tree while eavesdropping on what might be the loudest whisper in all of Memphis. Two women recline near a fountain, hair plaited, wigs tilted back for breeze. One murmurs something about a merchant's son sneaking into the priestess quarters last night. The other gasps not because of the scandal, but because she's already heard from her barber. That's the moment it clicks. Barbers aren't just groomers or priests or even stylists. They're information pipelines. You nod slowly, feeling both impressed and slightly terrified. In ancient Egypt, if the walls had ears, the barbers had better ones. You duck into a nearby barber shop, not a stall this time, but a well-established corner with stone benches, a chipped water basin, and a small painted sign of a razor crossed with an ankh. Inside, the atmosphere is loose. A young man is getting his beard shaped, while a child plays with a carved wooden comb. The barber moves quickly, confidently, but his real skill, listening. The customer starts with a complaint about his neighbor's goats wandering into his courtyard. But by the third stroke of the razor, he's detailing his mistress's perfume preferences and where she hides the love notes he leaves. All of this is offered with the same tone someone might use to talk about bread prices. You sip some water from a communal jar, bold move and watch. The barber never interrupts, never reacts too strongly. Just gentle nods and the occasional like a priest hearing confessions if the confessions were juicier and had more goat-related side plots. Historians still argue whether barbers actively encouraged gossip or simply couldn't avoid it. Some believe they played matchmaker, therapist, even secret agent. Others think they just stood too close to too many mouths to stay uninformed. Either way, you're beginning to suspect every revolution in Egypt started with a barber who knew too much. One fringe text disputed obviously claims a barber once thwarted an assassination by warning a vizier during a shave. Whether that's true or just another story sharpened over time, the lesson is clear. Never underestimate someone holding a blade to your throat while smiling politely. You glance toward a girl at the entrance waiting her turn. She's not here for a haircut, her head's shaved already. She's here to ask if the barber knows whether her betrothed really left for Abydos, or if he just ducked out with her cousin. The barber doesn't answer right away, just adjusts his razor, rinses it in lemon water, and says he took a black wig with him. Silence. That one sentence says everything. You look around and notice more subtle clues. A pile of amulets left as payment. A small scroll, half hidden, with names and dates appointments. Maybe, or maybe not just that. A memory log, a social web, a cheat sheet to the entire neighborhood's entanglements. One elderly man strolls in just to say hello. He doesn't need a shave, but he wants to talk about his daughter's marriage plans. You wonder if he's here to spread the word or make sure it stays off certain tongues. The barber's nod is slow, measured, approved. It dawns on you that this isn't just a barbershop, it's a gossip embassy, a matchmaking firm, and a subtle information vault. And like all good vaults, it's not easily opened. You start to wonder how barbers train for this. Was there an apprenticeship in discretion? Did someone sit them down and say, "Remember, smooth scalp, smoother lies"? Fringe barbers in rural areas were known to add love consultations to their services for a few extra coins. They'd interpret dreams, mix hair oils with charms, and whisper predictions about marriage, fertility, and which neighbor might secretly be a cat in disguise. That last part was probably just for fun. The child playing with the comb has moved on to braiding goat hair into a doll's wig. The customer finishes, pays with dried figs, and a joke about his wife's cooking, and strolls off looking 10 years lighter. You take his seat. The barber places one hand on your shoulder and asks, "So, want the truth? Or just the usual trim?" You smile, not entirely sure. He begins. His hands are steady, but his words are looser now. He tells you about a woman who came in asking whether her husband had taken a second wife. The answer wasn't in the husband's beard, but in the scent clinging to his neck. Oil jasmine. Not myrrh, jasmine, he says, is the perfume of bold new lovers. You raise an eyebrow, he shrugs, or cheap vendors. The blade runs smooth down your jawline, and you realize this is therapy disguised as grooming. He shaves stress and secrets in equal measure. By the end of your trim, you know 3 new rumors, 2 alleged affairs, and the current black market price for a stolen ceremonial comb. You pay in salted almonds, then ask quietly, did the woman's husband ever return? The barber pauses. She comes by every week, never for a trim, and that says enough. You step outside, the sun a little lower now, casting long shadows of passers-by and even longer shadows of secrets. You look back once, and the barber is already mid-conversation again. Hair, it seems, grows back. But secrets, those never really leave the chair. You're following the Nile now, past reed houses and papyrus sellers, toward a neighborhood where the barbers don't wait for you, you wait for them. This is where elite clients live. Government scribes, temple accountants, and the sort of people who wear linen so fine it shimmers like moonlight when they turn. They're barbers. They're not stationed in dusty stalls. They're mobile. They're summoned. They carry custom kits wrapped in embroidered cloth and wear sandals with actual soles. You trail one such barber, a tall man with steady hands and a satchel filled with sharp copper tools and scented oils through a maze of alleys, until he's led in through a courtyard gate by a servant wearing too much eye paint and not enough patience. Today's client is a cousin of the Pharaoh's consort. Not quite royalty, but close enough to make everyone nervous. He lounges on a cushioned bench in a shaded veranda, sipping date wine with an attitude that suggests he invented the sun. The barber doesn't flinch. He bows just once, sets down his satchel, and opens it like a priest unveiling sacred objects. Each tool glints in the filtered sunlight: a polished razor, a golden-handled comb, a small flask of crocodile oil, probably symbolic, hopefully not literal, and a cloth infused with blue lotus essence. He begins, first the brows, then the sideburns, then a careful trim of the beard, not removal, just reshaping. The client is talking the whole time, of course, about boat races, taxes, some scandal at a temple garden party involving someone's overly revealing linen wrap. The barber says almost nothing, but you watch his eyes. They move with the calculation of a scribe scanning ledgers for embezzlement. Historians still argue whether elite barbers were full-time staff or contracted specialists. Some records list them under household roles, while others mention payment in silver rings or even livestock. One papyrus details a legal dispute between 2 noble families over the poaching of a favored barber. A fringe theory suggests that pharaohs had shadow barbers, men who performed ceremonial grooming while the real haircut happened elsewhere, just in case someone tried to curse the process. But here's what you can tell firsthand. This barber has power. Not overt, not flashy, but the kind that makes even noblemen pause mid-sip if he clears his throat. He finishes the beard, then unwraps a tiny pot of coal and gestures toward the noble's eyes. The client nods, not because he's vain though, yes, but because even he knows image is survival, especially at court, where one misaligned brow can spark rumors of madness or weakness. The barber applies the coal with a reed stylus, slow, exact. When he's done, the noble studies his reflection in a bronze mirror, polished so well you can practically see your own poor posture in it. Satisfied, he waves his hand dismissively and says, "Send him out with dates." The barber bows again, but you notice he doesn't reach for the dates. A servant packs them in a cloth and hands them over like a bribe. As the barber exits, you catch up. He speaks without looking at you. They pay in fruit, flattery, and fear. You ask how many noble clients he has. He shrugs. Enough to stay invisible. You walk together, weaving through streets where barefoot kids chase stray cats and merchants shout about fish that are definitely not from yesterday. He tells you about a scribe who requested a mustache trim right before testifying at a trial. Said it made him more believable. The barber mutters, "But I think he just wanted to impress the judge's daughter." There's one noblewoman, he says, who insists on having her wigs scented with imported myrtle oil from Byblos. Costs more than most people's homes. I spill half of it on purpose. he adds with a grin, makes her feel special. You ask if he ever gets nervous shaving powerful men, trimming brows that might frown into fury. He stops walking and thinks, I'm not nervous. He says, I'm careful. Same blade can shave a cheek or start a war. You try to imagine a barber starting a war. It's not as hard as you expected. At a corner, he parts ways, vanishing into another alley where a merchant waits with a jug of beer and a nervous twitch. Another elite, probably, or someone pretending to be one. In Egypt, image is everything, and the barber's blade is the brush that paints it. You wander off again, this time picturing a map of all the secret knowledge barbers hold. Affairs, bribes, festive hairstyles that hint at forbidden love, facial hair as coded messages, an eyebrow arched just right could be an entire thesis in social maneuvering. And somewhere in the midst of all that, a quiet man with a copper blade, pretending not to listen, but hearing everything. You're wading through the afternoon haze now, down a narrower alley where barbers don't cater to nobles or priests. No, this is the turf of rivalries. The street barbers of the working class, where blades are sharp, tempers are shorter, and clients are fiercely loyal to whoever shaved their head last week without nicking an ear. You spot two stalls on opposite sides of the same alley. They're almost identical. Low stools, mismatched cloth awnings, the faint scent of date oil and sweat, but the tension in the air, that's different. One barber, older, with sun-darkened skin and a permanent scowl, is giving a teenager a rough trim. Across the way, a younger man with a perfectly groomed beard leans casually against his kit box, humming as if he's not glancing over every 2 seconds. They don't speak to each other. They don't need to. You settle on a stone step to observe the unspoken war. It starts subtle. The older barber flicks water onto the street a little too wide, landing near his rival's foot. The younger man responds by whistling a tune just a bit too loud, causing the old man's client to flinch. Historians still argue whether such rivalries were localized drama or part of a broader professional tension between barber guilds. Some texts refer to cutters' rings, early barber unions, or networks, while others suggest each barber worked as a lone wolf. Either way, when clients switch sides, things get personal, and someone has switched sides. A man approaches with a nervous glance. You can practically see his dilemma. Stay loyal to Old Blade McEyebrow, or try Young Beard's new mango-scented aftershave. In the end, the mango wins. The older barber doesn't say anything, but his grip on the razor tightens, just slightly. You edge closer to get a better view, pretending to stretch but actually desperate to understand how this rivalry began. A boy nearby eating bread and clearly eavesdropping whispers, "He stole his golden mirror." You blink. What? According to neighborhood legend and this child, who seems far too informed, the younger barber once worked for the older one, apprenticed under him, learned everything. Blade angles, oil mixtures, even the eyebrow arch favored by scribes. And then, one day, the younger man left, took the golden mirror, an heirloom passed down from his teacher, and opened shop across the street. Fringe theory. Possibly. Totally believable in this environment. Definitely. The younger barber gestures theatrically to a waiting customer. No blood, no regrets. He calls. The crowd chuckles. The older man spits into a pot. Suddenly, you're watching more than haircuts. You're watching strategy. The younger man's tools are shinier, his oils more exotic. He offers discounted trims during festival weeks and throws in a wig brushing for free. The older barber, though, has loyalty. Customers who've sat in his stool since they had their first shave and still trust his hand, even if it trembles now and then. The tension grows. A woman arrives with her son, maybe 10 years old. She looks between the two shops. You see her hesitate. Both barbers look up. It's a standoff. She chooses the older man. You expect relief, maybe smugness, but instead, the younger barber just smiles, shrugs, and turns to his next client without missing a beat. The war continues, but it's quieter now. No curses, no sabotage, just two lives locked in a dance of reputation, memory, and the sharp edges of pride. Historians wonder if these rivalries ever turned violent. Some sources suggest they did. There's a half-preserved scroll in the Cairo Museum referencing a barber's night quarrel in which 3 men were shaved bald in revenge. Whether this was humiliation or hygiene is up for debate. You're pulled from your thoughts when a sandal flies through the air accidentally, supposedly landing between the two stalls. The child who whispered earlier claps gleefully. You take a risk. You sit in the younger barber's chair. He nods once, doesn't gloat, just gets to work. Fingers light, blade confident. He doesn't speak about his rival, doesn't need to. The silence between snips says it all. Mid-trim, he leans in and says quietly, "He taught me everything, even how to hate him properly." Then he adds, "But not how to make peach oil. That's mine." You grin. When he finishes, he hands you a shard of mirror, not golden, just polished bronze. You glance across the alley. The older barber is watching, not with fury, with something else, something softer, maybe regret, maybe longing, or maybe he just noticed the younger man used too much oil again. Either way, you leave the alley freshly shaved, a little oiled, and surprisingly moved. Barbers, it turns out, don't just shape hair, they shape each other. You're walking slower now, not just from the heat, but from something heavier, something more sacred in the air. The streets begin to shift. Less chatter, fewer stalls. You pass silent columns, cool stone courtyards, and the kind of stillness that makes your skin prickle, even in the sun. You've arrived at the edge of temple ground, not quite inside, but close enough to feel its hum. Here, barbers don't yell for customers. They wait, called upon only when needed for tasks that are, frankly, not for the faint of heart. Because these barbers, they don't just cut hair, they groom the gods. You stop before a ceremonial chamber's entrance. Carved into the wall is a scene, a figure bending before a statue, razor in hand. The god stands tall, eternal, unblinking, and yet being shaved. Somehow, this feels like both reverence and audacity. Inside the chamber, the smell changes, less human, more sacred. Incense, old oils, the sharp tang of natron. A group of priests stand by a statue of Osiris, its face serene, its wig carefully arranged, but dusty from months of festivals and smoke. That's where the barber comes in. He enters quietly, no fanfare, no tools on display, just a small, tightly bound bundle in cloth, carried like a relic. He approaches the statue, bows low, not dramatically, just enough, and unwraps his kit. You lean in. The razor is older than he is, copper, dulled but respected. Next to it, a bundle of flax thread, a bone comb, and a small vial filled with oil so fragrant it makes your eyes water slightly. He begins his work not on a man's, but on the god's wig trimming, dusting, refreshing the braids. With each pass of the blade, it's as if he's restoring divine dignity. After all, how can a god bless a harvest with tangled curls? Historians still argue whether these barbers were priests first, or barbers first and priests trained later. Some texts hint at specialized titles. Divine groomer, servant of the sacred scalp. Fringe scholars even suggest entire rituals were designed around wakening the god by renewing their appearance. You watch, silent, and then, the part no one warns you about. A second group of priests enters, this time carrying something draped in linen. It's a body. You stiffen. This isn't a statue. The barber kneels beside the deceased. In Egypt, death isn't the end. It's a transition, and transitions require preparation. That means yes, shaving. The dead must be cleaned, purified, and groomed before mummification. Every hair, every patch of skin must be smooth, sacred, ready. Because when the spirit awakens in the afterlife, it shouldn't have to worry about stubble. The barber works with delicate care. No audience here, just him, the priests, and you, quietly trying not to breathe too loudly. He uses oil-soaked linen to wipe the face, trims what little hair remains, and whispers something under his breath. Maybe it's a prayer, maybe it's habit. You look around and see murals depicting the same scene, barbers tending to the dead, sometimes next to embalmers, sometimes entirely alone. A forgotten role, but central nonetheless. One wall even shows Anubis himself leaning over a body, razor in hand. It's unclear whether it's symbolic or if people actually believe the god of embalming shaves souls into readiness. Fringe theorists love that one. The priest barber finishes. He rewraps his tools, bows again, and leaves as silently as he entered. No one thanks him. No one claps. But every face in the room softens slightly, as if something holy just passed through. You follow him out, step by step, down a quiet hallway back toward the human world. He speaks only once. They wake up clean. You don't ask what he means. You just nod. Back outside. The sunlight feels vulgar. The noise of the city returns, donkeys braying, merchants shouting, children laughing. But your mind is still in that chamber, where a copper blade brushed eternity. You pass another barbershop on your way home. It feels different now, because some barbers give you a new look. Others, they give you your afterlife face. You're inside a tomb now. Well, not inside, but close enough to feel the coolness creep into your sandals. This one's newly sealed. Paint still fresh. Scents of resin and stone dust thick in the air. The funerary workers have left. The priests have chanted. And the tomb owner, some mid-level official with a taste for goose liver and flattery, is now eternally horizontal. But among the painted scenes lining the walls, hunters, bakers, musicians. One figure catches your eye. A barber. He's small, seated, razor in hand, working quietly on a client who's already halfway to the afterlife. And just like that, you realize barbers didn't just serve the living. They were companions to the dead, forever etched into the stone record, immortalized in the company of brewers and boatmen. The message is clear. In the next life, a man still wants a clean shave and a tight trim. You step closer to the wall. The scene is detailed. Copper tools hang from the barber's belt, oil pots at his feet. His client mid-lather. You wonder who painted this. Was it from memory? From love? Or did the deceased specifically request it? Historians still debate how much influence individuals had over their tomb designs. Some scholars believe elite Egyptians drafted specific afterlife resumes to ensure they had everything they'd need: servants, food, wigs, lovers, and yes, barbers. Fringe researchers point out that barbers are often shown next to food preparers, suggesting a deeper connection. You eat, you groom, you continue to be seen. You step back, and the full picture sinks in. Grooming wasn't vanity, it was spiritual preparation. A barber didn't just shave your face. He preserved your dignity across worlds. Later, outside the tomb, you meet a man sitting near the threshold. He's quiet, surrounded by a modest kit, a single razor, a bottle of oil, and a small, faded mirror. He tells you he's here for the Kai. You raise an eyebrow. He explains that the K, the life force, the soul needs recognition. It needs reminders of routine, of identity. Sometimes, families would hire barbers to perform grooming rituals at tomb entrances, days or even years after the burial, just in case the Ka wandered back needing a refresh. It sounds ridiculous, and yet it isn't. You sit beside him and watch. He mimes the motions: rinsing, shaving, applying oil. No client, just the air, the tomb, and the steady whisper of tradition. You ask if it works. He shrugs. Depends who's watching. He gestures to a small shrine nearby. It holds a wig, carefully combed and set on a clay stand. Beside it, a dried bouquet of lotus. No inscription, no name. Her family moved. He says, but I still trim the ends, just in case. You glance at the wig. It's brittle. Yes, but the effort is undeniable. Somewhere, somehow, maybe she notices. You walk on, this time through a field of tombs, some crumbling, some fresh, all painted with lives and half-lives. You start spotting more barbers, always in the corner, always mid-trim, always there. You wonder what kind of person asks to bring a barber into the afterlife. Someone proud, Vong, or someone who simply wants to feel human, even in death. You remember the man's words. Depends who's watching. Maybe it's not about how they see you. Maybe it's about how you see yourself. Fringe beliefs in the New Kingdom even suggested that unkempt spirits couldn't pass certain underworld gates. If your soul approached Osiris with a tangled beard or uneven bangs, you might be told politely but firmly to get yourself together. Some funerary texts included grooming spells, invocations to ensure the razor would find you in the dark, that oil would reach your skin, that your mirror would not break. It's both absurd and heartbreakingly human. You sit on a low wall and think about your own face. Not metaphorically, literally. What version of you would be painted on your tomb? Shaved, wigged, mid-laugh. You hope the barber gets your good side. By now, the sun is lower, casting long shadows across the necropolis. A small breeze stirs the dust, and you swear it smells faintly of lotus and copper. You walk back slowly, leaving the tombs behind, but carrying something with you. A new respect, maybe, or a quiet longing. To be seen, to be touched, to be remembered with dignity, even in the dark. You're awake early, barely dawn, and following the clatter of copper and bone. Today's destination isn't a shop or a shrine. It's the workshop where barbers' tools are born. You duck into a low clay structure near the edge of the craftsman quarter, where the smell of heated metal and bitter resin stings your nose. Inside, it's dim, hot, and alive with motion. A toolmaker squats by a fire, heating strips of copper until they glow like desert sunrises. Beside him, a younger assistant shapes the handles, some from wood, some from carved bone, and one from a strip of dark ivory inlaid with tiny gold flakes. Even the simplest barber kit, it turns out, is a blend of art and accuracy. You sit near the wall, eyes wide, watching the ritual unfold. The razors are flat, crescent-shaped, honed on sandstone blocks. No hinges, no safety guards. These blades don't forgive mistakes. Every tool here is handmade, sharpened with a craftsman's prayer, and tested on a piece of shaved leather before it's passed to a barber. The toolmaker pauses his work and shows you a leather pouch, a full kit, razor, tweezers, small comb, and a flask that smells like crushed mint and something else, lion sweat. He says, deadpan. You laugh. He doesn't, real or not. He shrugs. They believe it gives courage to the hand. Historians still debate what ancient barbers actually put into their oils. Some papyri list ingredients like date pit ash, juniper sap, and ground malachite. Others read like potion recipes, cat hair, crocodile bile, even stardust, likely powdered mica. But still, fringe theorists go further, claiming some oils were charmed by temple scribes to protect clients from envy and evil glances. The toolmaker gestures to a stone shelf where rows of oil jars sit. Each has a painted glyph, some simple, some elaborate. He opens one, and a wave of scent hits you. Cinnamon, honey, lotus, root. He explains that certain barbers commission custom blends. Scent, after all, is memory. A noble might want to smell of victory. A widow might want to smell like the husband she buried. You ask if barbers choose their own blades. He grins. No blade chooses its barber. You don't push it. Instead, you watch him burnish a razor until you can see your reflection in it. Distorted, but alive. The handle he adds next is carved with a spiral, a symbol for continuity, eternity, maybe even hair growth. You wonder if the barber who buys it will notice or care. Outside, the morning grows louder. You leave the workshop, still carrying the scent of crushed mint and brass. Down the road, a street barber waves his blade in the sun, signaling he's open. A child sits down in front of him with a coin and an attitude. You pause beside them. The barber's tools are older, chipped, hand-wrapped with linen strips for grip, and yet he moves like a sculptor. Every stroke light, deliberate. He finishes the boy's head and dabs it with oil. From the jar, you smell the same cinnamon blend from the workshop. Not lion sweat, something else. You mention it. The barber raises an eyebrow. Memory oil, he says. You ask what it's for. To make them remember who they are, he says, or who they want to be. He looks you over and adds, you smell like a bronze handle and too many questions. You laugh. He doesn't. The boy skips off, head gleaming, coin well spent. The barber rinses his blade in a basin and starts to hum something familiar. You realize it's the same melody you heard from the temple barber. The song carries. It weaves through time, through classes, through rituals. It's not about style. It's about presence. You sit quietly beside him, watching the sun rise across polished copper. You don't speak, neither does he, because sometimes it's enough to know the tools are in good hands, and that someone, somewhere, is always shaping your story with a razor and a little oil. You're wandering into a different kind of barber shop now. One not marked by tools or tents, but by herbs hanging from rafters and the strong, unmistakable smell of boiled onions. That's right. You've entered the realm of the barber healer. It begins innocently enough. A woman sits on a mat while the barber shaves her head, her eyes closed in what looks like relief. But halfway through, he stops, dips his fingers into a wooden bowl filled with crushed green paste, and gently massages it onto her scalp. The room fills with a scent you can't quite place: minty, spicy, slightly suspicious. She opens her eyes and says, "Feels better already." You blink. Feels better. From a haircut. You're about to question it when a boy limps in, holding his ankle. The barber waves him over, inspects the foot, and pulls out a strip of linen, a tiny knife, and something that looks like a pickled root. He trims the boy's toenails ritualistically, apparently, chants softly, applies a poultice, and sends him off with a honey date and a warning not to run near the riverbank again. It's a barber shop, but with side quests. You sit on a stool near the door and begin to realize that in ancient Egypt, barbers weren't always just about appearance. They were also healers, unofficial, unlicensed, but deeply trusted. Many people, especially in rural areas, couldn't afford separate specialists. The barber, he knew how to stop a nosebleed, diagnose a rash, or brew an infusion for melancholy. And yes, he still trimmed your beard while doing it. Historians still argue whether barber healers were respected or looked down upon by real physicians. Some temple archives show cooperation barbers referring serious cases to trained medics. Others show turf wars, especially in cities where healers considered barbers' herbal cures too folkloric, too dangerous. Fringe texts go a step further, claiming that certain barbers were rumored to read sickness in the hair spotting liver disease from dull roots, predicting fever from scalp patterns, even diagnosing pregnancy by sniffing a woman's braid. Dubious, of course, but comforting. Weirdly, yes, the barber approaches you now, asks if you're tired. You nod. He checks your eyes, your tongue, your hairline. Then, with a knowing grunt, he produces a clay pot filled with something gelatinous and green. Headache balm, he says, smearing it onto your temples without permission or warning. It tingles, then burns slightly, then cools. You feel lighter, or maybe just confused. He sits beside you and mutters, "You sleep too close to reeds, too damp." Attracts memory worms. You decide not to ask. Instead, you glance at the back shelf. Rows of jars, all unlabeled. Probably oils, possibly curses. A young man stumbles in, holding his stomach, claiming he's been haunted by dreams of sour goats. The barber hands him a sprig of crushed mint, tells him to chew and think happy thoughts. Then he snips the man's beard into a cleaner line and sends him off with a pat on the back. You look around. Everywhere you turn, someone is being comforted, not cured. Maybe, but seen. Tended to. A woman with a baby on her hip asks for scalp powder to ease heat boils. A fisherman with calloused hands receives a toe soak and a gentle scolding about sandals. A boy gets a ritual braid for courage before starting his apprenticeship. No one leaves unchanged. And somehow, you realize this is less about belief in the treatment and more about the barber's role as keeper of well-being. He doesn't promise miracles, just attention, just touch. You ask him what's in the green headache balm. He winks, mostly. Onion. You laugh, then pause. Wait, mostly. He stands, washes his hands in a clay basin, and begins humming another version of that same ancient melody. You're starting to believe barbers invented Egypt's background music. He turns back to you with a final question. You want healing, or a haircut. You smile. Whatever comes first. He nods, picks up a comb, and begins. You're walking carefully now, eyes scanning over shoulders and alley corners, because today's barber isn't the soothing type. He's the one they whisper about, the one who knows too much. You hear about him from a bread vendor with a broken sandal. She leans in and mutters, "The barber by the granary. Be careful, he talks too much and listens too well." Naturally, you head there immediately. You find him in a shadowed corner of the market district, his stall half hidden behind a cracked wall, painted with fading symbols, part blessing, part warning. He's wiry, with fingers that twitch like they're always holding something sharp. His clients speak in low tones, and his blades are always freshly polished. Today, though, the stool is empty. He's alone, sitting cross-legged and filing his nails with the edge of a copper comb. You sit, say nothing. He looks at you without blinking and murmurs, "You're not from here." That's why you still have questions. You blink back, unsure whether to feel seen or unsettled. He begins prepping your scalp with oil cool, thick, and smelling faintly of crushed olives and secrets. As he works, he talks, not about your hair, about people. The priest with the golden ring. His wife comes in for eyebrow shaping and never pays. Swipe. The grain inspector has a second family in another village. His beard tells on him keeps growing lopsided when he lies. Swipe. You ask him how he knows these things. He shrugs. They talk. I listen. Or they don't talk. That's louder. Historians still argue whether barbers were considered trustworthy or dangerously informed. Some ancient letters warn about the blade who whispers, likely a barber with loose lips. In several legal disputes, barbers were called as witnesses, especially in cases involving family disputes, temple affairs, or stolen livestock. One fringe theory suggests that barbers were occasionally used by royal scribes as informal informants, not spies exactly, but let's say sharp-eared civic participants. The barber tightens his grip slightly as he shifts your head. You ever see a man cry mid-trim? He asks. You nod slowly. Then you know, he says. It's not a question. He starts trimming your sideburns and casually drops a story about a nobleman who paid him in wines, then threatened him when the cut revealed an old scar. The man was hiding more than a bad jawline. He wanted me to forget it. The barber whispers. So I told him I did. Swipe. Then I told his wife. You freeze. He grins. You're starting to understand why people fear him. Not because of what he does with the blade, but what he does with words. He continues talking, but more carefully now, about a priestess, a missing ceremonial blade, a rumor that someone swapped wig oils during a sacred rite, causing the goddess's statue to weep. You think statues cry? He asks. You shrug. Neither do I. But people do, especially when their secrets come back to sit in this chair. Swipe. You realize he's not just repeating gossip. He's storing it, sorting it, using it. Every cut, every silence, every twitch, he's taking notes. He pulls out a cloth, wipes your neck, and leans in close. Sometimes, he says softly, I cut hair just to get someone talking. Not for them. For the one who comes in next. You ask if that's dangerous. He smiles without humor. Dangerous is a man who talks too much. I listen. Then he adds, almost as an afterthought. But I know who talks. You stand, half-shaved and fully unnerved. But something holds you there. Because the truth is, this barber isn't cruel. He's just sharp. Like his tools. Like his tongue. He wraps your head gently in a linen cloth, then whispers something you don't catch. A prayer. A warning. A name. You walk away without asking, because sometimes the man who trims your beard knows your soul better than your God. And sometimes he knows where the body's buried. You glance back once, but he's already speaking to someone new. A soldier? Perhaps. Or a thief. The words are soft. The blade gleams, and in the distance, a secret changes hands under the guise of grooming. You're following music now. Reedy flutes and soft drums that guide you toward the riverbanks just north of Thebes. But this isn't just a celebration, it's festival day. And as the city exhales in sweet relief from its daily grind, something curious appears along the procession routes. Barbers, dozens of them, everywhere. Pop-up stalls, makeshift tents, portable stools, and sharpened razors catching sunlight like ceremonial daggers. You didn't expect to see this many barbers at what's essentially a giant block party, but here they are. Setting up shop between date wine vendors and flower garland sellers, you spot one tent with a palm frond roof and an actual linen banner. Fresh faces for the Festival of Beautiful Reunion. You blink. That's bold branding for 1200 BCE. Inside, a barber is doing touch-up shaves while his assistant fans the clients. Nearby, a group of young men drink fig wine and argue over which eyebrow shape is most pleasing to Hathor. You settle onto a mat. More curious than thirsty, historians confirm that barbers often played active roles in festival preparation. Appearance mattered especially during events celebrating divine reunions, fertility rites, and symbolic rebirths. A clean shave wasn't just cosmetic, it was spiritual participation. It meant being presentable to both gods and eligible festival crushes. One barber you observe chants softly as he oils a man's scalp, then taps a small amulet against the client's chest for charm. he says, and digestion. You sidle closer to a group gathered around a stone basin. There's music playing, and one of the barbers is giving festival braids long, beaded locks that sway with every laugh. The woman getting one done says it's to impress her neighbor's brother, who sells honey but smells like ambition. Barber as matchmaker. Check. Fringe theorists go further, arguing that festivals like this were prime time for ritual grooming meant to shift luck, reveal one's true desires, or make offerings through strands of hair. Yes, some people braided their wishes into their hair, then offered them to river altars after the celebration. You glance downstream and, sure enough, spot a few lotus wreaths and single plates floating away like whispers to the gods. The music swells, and the energy rises. In one corner, a group of barbers hosts a contest, Best Beard Design. A man with his facial hair shaped like a falcon wins second place. First place goes to a boy whose beard is oiled, curled, and glittering with crushed lapis. The prize, a tiny bronze mirror, and everyone's attention. You ask one of the barbers if this happens every year. He nods, pulling you into his tent. This is when people want to look the way they feel. He says, new year, new harvest, new romance. It all begins with a clean face and a good scent. He rubs a bit of sandalwood oil onto your neck and explains that certain scents are chosen for specific outcomes. Myrrh for seduction, frankincense for spiritual clarity, onion oil for warding off bad suitors and possibly everyone else. You mention the eyebrow argument you overheard. He snorts, left eyebrow curved slightly upward. He says, it's the wink of the gods. You're still laughing when a woman bursts in, asking for a full restyle. I saw him. He's here. He can't see me like this. The barber gets to work, braiding, trimming, chanting. You sit beside her as she nervously fans herself and confesses her plan. He thinks I moved to Karnak. She says, he doesn't know I'm back. Yet, you ask how long it's been. She blushes. 3 festivals, barbers as accomplices. Oh, definitely. The crowd outside surges as a procession approaches priests, dancers, offerings being carried on polished wood trays. People cheer, throw petals, and sip wine from reed cups. But inside this tent, time slows. One woman's hair is being dusted with powdered hibiscus. A boy receives a ceremonial trim before joining the riverboat choir. A mother has her daughter's braids coiled into the eye of Horus design protection, vision, and good matchmaking luck all in one. And in the center of it all, the barbers, steady hands, rhythmic words, gentle razors. You realize they're part of the ritual, not just side vendors, but spiritual stylists prepping souls for transformation. You step outside, your own face tingling with oil and maybe a bit of rose powder. The air is thick with celebration drums, incense, the occasional awkward dance attempt. People glow, not from wealth or makeup, but from the care taken in how they were prepared. Barbers don't just groom for the festival, they make the festival possible. And somewhere, amid all the braids and jokes and scent-slicked hands, they remind everyone that renewal doesn't always begin with a prayer. Sometimes, it starts with a haircut. It's dusk now, and the streets have thinned. The petals from the festival have begun to wilt underfoot. The drums have quieted, and the barbers have packed their portable kits. Most of them, anyway. You wander toward the residential quarter, where the shadows stretch long and linen curtains sway like secrets in the wind. That's when you hear it. A voice, low and urgent, spilling from a window. You pause. It's a name, repeated twice. You shouldn't eavesdrop, but naturally, you do. Inside, a woman is pacing. He touched her wig. She hisses, not by accident. The man responds flatly. That barber's been too familiar. You lean back, heart pounding slightly, not because of the scandal, but because it confirms what you've begun to suspect. Barbers didn't just cut hair, they stirred stories. And occasionally, they found themselves inside those stories. This section of town is wealthy, private, veiled in perfumed discretion. But behind those veils, affairs and power plays crackle like papyrus over flame. And barbers, they're often the first to know. You slip into a shaded courtyard, where a servant directs you to a quiet barber. A man who rarely speaks but somehow hears everything. He's preparing oils in clay bowls when you arrive, calm as the moon, hands steady. You sit, he nods, as he begins to shave your neck. the servant whispers nearby. She's telling him something about a priestess and her mysterious trips to the herbalist. The barber's only response is to adjust your jawline and change blades. But later, as he oils your face, he speaks. Her husband knows. You raise your eyebrows. He asked for lotus scent in her wig last month. She came back with myrrh. Swipe. He glances at you in the mirror shard. He'll do nothing. Not until he finds the blade. You freeze? The ceremonial one. He clarifies, missing since last procession, used to crown initiates. Now it's somewhere else. Historians still argue whether barbers were ever directly involved in temple intrigues. While some dismiss the idea as tabloid tier conjecture, others believe certain barbers acted as informal agents, keepers of personal truths and social vulnerabilities. Fringe scholars believe a barber once helped unseat a high priest by planting a sliver of dyed hair into a sacred statue's wig, evidence of vanity, of impurity. Whether that's myth or smear campaign is anyone's guess. You ask softly, was it her lover? The barber wipes your brow. She cuts her own hair now, doesn't trust anyone else with her secrets. You nod, but he's not done. She left a comb. Gold edge, sacred symbol scratched into the handle. You don't ask what symbol. You've read enough tomb text to guess. He finishes your trim in silence, offering a sprig of mint to chew and a thin band of linen to cover your head. For protection, he murmurs. The street sees everything. You step back into the quiet alleys, where the torches now flicker with gossip more than flame. From one corner, you hear a servant muttering. The mistress was seen leaving the tent with her wig askew. From another, the barber wasn't in his stall today. He's been summoned. You start to realize barbers hold a unique place in the social pyramid. Not quite elite, not quite servant, but everywhere in between, able to move through doorways that others couldn't. Intimate without being intimate. Present but invisible. You pass a wine shop where two men lean in close, arguing in whispers. One gestures to his bare chin. I told him too much. He says, now he knows. The other scoffs, then shave it again. Give him something better to remember. It's a joke. But it isn't. You return home wherever home is in this ancient night with your hair neat, your skin oiled, and your mind buzzing with the soft electric hum of unspoken truths. You lie back, staring at the carved ceiling, and wonder, what stories are hiding in your own strands? Who holds your secrets? And would you even recognize the blade if it came for you next? The night deepens now. The streets are mostly quiet, just the occasional donkey snort, the rustle of reeds, the hushed creak of sandals over dry earth. You're back in the poorer quarters, where life hums lower and slower, and the glow of oil lamps flickers more from draft than drama. This part of the city once had 3 barbers. Now it has 1. You find him in a small stall, tucked beneath a crumbling archway. His tools are clean, but old. His hands practiced, but slower than they once were. He nods as you approach and gestures to the stool without a word. As he begins to shave you, you glance around. There's no line outside, no crowd of gossiping clients, no fancy oils or perfume towels, just the scent of olive soap and the soft, rhythmic sound of the razor scraping skin. This used to be a bustling area. You can still see the faded paint on the stall next door, an old barber's mark scratched into plaster. The younger barbers, you learn, left during the recent dynastic upheaval. Some joined perfumer guilds. Some went north to cities where foreign stylists were taking over. This man stayed. You ask him why. He shrugs. Someone has to. The shave continues in silence. But something about it feels heavier than usual. You're not just receiving a trim. You're witnessing the slow retreat of a profession from the spotlight. Historians agree that toward the later dynasties, barbers began to lose status. Perfume houses grew more fashionable. Foreign grooming trends arrived via trade routes, curling irons from the Levant, new oils from Crete, brushes with bristles instead of bone combs. The humble Egyptian barber, no longer the gatekeeper of appearance, just a man with a razor, left behind by fashion. Fringe researchers suggest that some barbers resisted. They claim that during one New Kingdom rebellion, a group of barbers refused to style wigs in the Babylonian manner, insisting on the old ringlet styles of Queen Amos's time, resistance through grooming. Apparently, the barber you're with now finishes your shave, then leans back, He doesn't offer a mirror, just a cup of lukewarm barley tea and a nod toward the alley. You sip. Across the street, a new sign hangs, Foreign Hair Lounge. It's painted in both Egyptian and Greek. A tall man in a strange robe waves a bronze brush like it's a magic wand. Inside, the laughter is loud. The scents are exotic. You hear the clatter of silver, actual silver tools, imported. The old barber watches it all, quietly. You ask if he's angry. No, he says. They'll learn. You ask what they'll learn. That even foreign wigs get dusty. You smile, but it doesn't reach him. He stands, walks to the edge of the stall, and lights a small bowl of resin. The smoke curls up toward the stars, fragrant and unhurried. You ask how long he'll keep cutting. He thinks for a moment, then says, until someone forgets how. You walk away slowly, the night stretching like a long sigh behind you. Around the corner, a group of teenagers passes, laughing, hair unshaved, tangled, scented with something floral and new. You wonder if they even know the name of the man who shaved their grandfathers. You pass one more stall, abandoned. Inside, a cracked mirror, a broken comb, and a razor still waiting to be picked up. The wind slips through the alley and moves the curtain just enough to reveal a chair, empty, still facing forward, just in case. You're up early again. But today you walk slower. You've wandered through temples and tombs, alleys and palaces, sat in shaded stalls and narrow chairs. But now you find yourself at the edge of a ruin, not a famous one, no obelisks or grand inscriptions, just a pile of weather-softened stone, half swallowed by earth and time. The remains of a barber shop, no roof, just one leaning wall, where the faint ghost of a mural still clings. A man with a razor, another man seated. Their eyes meet through a smear of age and dust. You crouch. At your feet, half buried in sand, is the handle of a broken comb. Wood. Weathered gray, you brush it off gently. And for a moment, you don't see a ruin. You see a morning thousands of years ago, when a man came here nervously for his first shave before meeting his bride's family. When a widow asked to have her hair brushed the way her husband used to do it. When a child sat on a father's lap, squirming, unsure what the blade meant, only knowing the hands were kind. This shop once echoed with jokes, with arguments, with hushed confessions, oil spilled here, songs hummed here, blood, perhaps, tears, probably. Now, it's still, you run your fingers along the worn stone ledge. Someone once lined up razors here. Someone once whispered a spell before mixing oils. Someone once swept hair into little piles, each one carrying the weight of a person hoping to be seen differently, newly, better. Historians often overlook ruins like this, too small, too ordinary. But fringe archaeologists argue that these forgotten shops were the beating heart of Egyptian daily life. Every city had its scribes and priests, but every person had their barber. You walk among the rubble. Imagine the barbers who once lived here. Their names are lost, their tools scattered, their hands now dust, but their touch on the living, on the dying, on statues and children and royalty alike lingers. You find a flat stone with a smooth dip in the center, a grinding bowl, perhaps, where oils were mixed. You dip your hand in and imagine the scent of cedar, lotus, maybe even that mythic lion sweat. It's quiet. And in the quiet, you realize something. A barber's true art was not just in shaping appearance, but in bearing witness to joy, to sorrow, to love so strong it needed to be braided, to shame so heavy it was whispered behind the curtain, to men who came in hoping to look powerful, to women who left hoping to feel whole. You sit for a while on the old stool base, the wood long gone, the stone still warm from the sun, and for a fleeting second, you feel them, all of them. The barbers, the clients, the secrets, the stories. You close your eyes, not out of sadness, but because sometimes, when the past sits beside you gently, all it asks is that you remember it with your eyes shut, just for a moment. Now, as the last echoes of copper blades and soft whispers fade from the ruined stall, let your breath slow with them. Feel your scalp cool in the desert breeze. Let your shoulders soften, your hands fall still. The barbers are gone now, but their chairs remain in memory, in ritual, in the gentle scrape of time across skin. So if you still carry secrets, rest easy. Someone once held them. Carefully, if you still seek change, let it come softly. A trim, not a cut. A new shape. not a new self. And if sleep comes slow, steady, certain, welcome it like a familiar hand, guiding you gently from what you were into what you're becoming. One quiet shave at a time. Good night.